What if I told you most tech products don't fail because of bad code? They fail because everybody thought they were building the same thing and they weren't. A designer had one thing in mind, an engineer had built another. The stakeholders expected something else entirely, and nobody realizes until weeks later. It's almost always a user story problem. User stories are the make or break of any tech project. It's because they are the single place where intent becomes execution. When user stories are vague, your team tries to fill in the blanks. When they're overly detailed, your team stops thinking. And when they're wrong, you ship the wrong thing. Today we're going to talk about what a user story is, and more importantly, what a user story isn't. Why so many teams get it wrong, and how to write a user story that engineers, designers, and stakeholders can all interpret in the same way. And today we're going to be writing one live together. Before we get into writing the user stories, I just want to go through a few things. A user story is not responsible for describing every detail. It's to make sure everybody walks away with the same mental picture. If two engineers read the same user story and build two different things, the user story needs refinement. So what is a user story? A user story is a short and clear statement that describes who needs something, what they need, and why they need it. So everybody builds the same thing. For example, as a logged in user, I want to reset my password so that I can regain access if I forget it. To break that down a bit further, the who is the user, the what is resetting your password, and the why is if they forget their password. So when I think of user stories, I write them in sections. Each one exists for a certain reason, and that's what we're going to walk through. So as you can see, we are now in our Jira board. As you can see, I've created a test project. I'm now going to create, under the test project space I created, I'm going to make a user story. So as you can see, I've chosen story here in the to-do status. So for summary, we want to have something short, something brief. Basically, it gives you an idea of what you're talking about in one really short sentence. Password reset. Our summary, so something brief, something short. Password reset functionality sounds good. We always use the who, what, why strategy. So in terms of a password reset functionality, who are we talking about? We are talking about as a registered user, because that's who is doing the password reset. Then what? I want to reset my password via email. And why would somebody reset their password? Probably because they lost access to it. So that I can regain access to my accounts. So a little cheat sheet here is usually you'll have as, I want to, so that I. So if you just use these three keywords, you can fill in the rest. Treat it like a normal sentence. Next up, we're going to go to our acceptance criteria. The goal for the acceptance criteria is to remove any ambiguity. So how do we define when the story is done? The acceptance criteria will help with that. It should be written in clear, testable statements. It can be thought of as a contract between the product, the design, and the stakeholder team. Let's say, for example, given a user requests a password reset, when they submit their email, then a reset email link is sent. Or email with a reset link is sent. Excuse me. So as you can see here, this is a quote-unquote shared contract, and it is a clear, testable statement. Given that I reset I use my reset link, if the password meets the requirements, then access is restored. Hence, you lose your password, we get an email, we click on a link. If it meets the requirements, access should be restored. So as you can see here, this is also a shared contract, and it is a clear, testable statement. So now that we're done the acceptance criteria, that's awesome. we're going to go to our edge cases and our error states. So these are really, really important. I'd even go as far as saying after the description and the acceptance criteria that these are the most important, and these are often slept on. As humans, we always think of the positive cases, like how will things go if ideally you log in successfully? Great. What happens if you don't log in successfully? What happens if your password doesn't meet the criteria? What happens if your username doesn't use email regex? How does everything look with quote unquote negative case? Negative case meaning that the positive outcome did not happen. How are we going to handle the negative cases? And the edge cases and the error states are where we handle this. Often this is where most of the questions come from the developers. And this is what you'll have to refine later if you don't do a good job with it initially. It typically makes you think harder at the start, however, aligns everybody a lot more later on. So let's say if the user uses a invalid or expired reset link, they are prompted with Figma link. So as you can see here, hypothetically we'd have a Figma link that we connect to what would they be prompted with if there's an invalid or it's expired reset link. Another example is potentially if an email address is not associated with an account, then show. And then as you can see, we would also have a Figma link for that. So you can see that we're starting to think of the negative cases here. And a good thing to also think about is if API is not fetched successfully. Good, so now we have the descriptions, we have the acceptance criteria, and we have the edge cases / error states. Then I would go ahead and do a design / UX references section. Now this one's pretty self-explanatory, I think. You would have Figma links for whatever you need. So the design / UX reference section should typically showcase the design for what we're building. Designer will give you the Figma links, or you can go get them on yourself on the Figma platform. Alternatively, you could screenshot the pros and cons to this. The pros are it forces you to make sure your stories are absolutely always up to date, just in case there's any design updates, you'll have to update the photos. But the cons are if they're constantly changing, if the designers are constantly changing their designs, then you will have to go and consistently change the user story to update the screenshots. So I would say Figma links are the way to go with this. One other quick note that we should be very clear on is if you are writing a user story, let's avoid the words easily / quickly / user friendly / simple. These words are very arbitrary. What will happen if you use these words in your user stories is that it creates ambiguity, and people will, for example, start designing things on their own. They won't have guidance, they won't have clarity. Stakeholders may not be happy, designers and developers might not be aligned. So it's very clear that if these words are in your user story, that you might need to do some refinement with your team. Good. So that's everything on how you would make a user story. All right, great job, everybody. We made our first user story together. Well, that's us making our first user story together. I hope you enjoy your journey in making many user stories throughout your career. Super excited to hear your guys' feedback on this video. Thanks for watching if you got this far. All the best.